the PDB Situation Report. I'm Mike Baker, your eyes and ears on the world stage. All right, let's get briefed. We'll start things off with the latest from the Israel-Iran war. Israeli jets still control the skies over Tehran, and Iran's leaders, well, they're vowing to fight to the end. We'll get perspective from retired IDF Major General Yaakov Amidror. Later in the show, regime change in Iran may no longer be a hypothetical. With the mullahs on the ropes, could the people finally bring 45 years of Islamic rule to an end? Former Senator Robert Torricelli weighs in. But first, today's Situation Report Spotlight. It's been just over a week since Israel launched its campaign against Iran, and at this point, Israel controls the skies. Iran's nuclear facilities, missile launch platforms, and top military leaders have all come under sustained attack. In response, Iran is firing off smaller and less effective barrages, many now hitting civilian areas, including a hospital on Wednesday. So, how has Israel pulled this off? And how long can the operation continue? Joining me now is retired IDF Major General Yaakov Amidror. He's a distinguished fellow at the Amidror Center for Defense and Strategy, and he previously served as Israel's national security advisor. Sir, thank you very much for taking the time to join us here on the Situation Report.
Thank you for having me.
Now, if we may, I'd like to start with a fairly broad question here at the 30,000-foot level, and that would be, what, from your perspective, what is the goal here? Is the goal the destruction of the Iranian nuclear program, or is the goal regime change?
Oh, the goal is very clear. The goal is to destroy the ability of Iran to produce military nuclear capability. We don't want to have Iran with a bomb, and we will do whatever is needed to prevent Iran from having this bomb. The second issue, which was important for us, is about the missiles that they are producing. They are launching They launched more than 400, almost 450 heavy missiles into Israel, and we see the damage of each missile when it hit Tel Aviv or Haifa or Beersheba. The Iranians had a plan to produce 10,000 missiles like that, and even bigger than those. And we are determined to destroy the whole infrastructure that they have and not let them to build more missiles in the future. These are the two goals of the war, nothing more than that. Of course, on side effect of it, we had to destroy the air defense system of Iran. So we will have the ability to control the skies. So we did it. We had to minimize their ability to launch missiles into Israel. So we are killing many launchers, and we are destroying many storages of missiles inside Iran. But this is only because our homeland is getting the missiles, and that is limiting our time. So these are not the goals. The goals are very clear. I must admit that the regime afterwards will be weaker, no question. But we cannot impose a regime in Iran. It's too big. The Iranians will have to make the decision whom they want to be the rulers in the future. The regime will be weaker, but we cannot make the change. The change should be done by the Iranians.
Okay. If we look at the issue of the nuclear program, the destruction of the nuclear program, in your estimation, can that be done without the involvement of the U.S.?
There is one installation that we don't know to do as good as the American. It's the Fordo installation. Mm. We don't have the mother of all bomb. We don't have the ability to carry it. It's Americans can do it with B-52 and B-2. And if we want that to be destroyed, totally destroyed, that should be done by the Americans. We can make damage to the place. We can block the entrances, for example. We can destroy the installations around it. but we cannot destroy it completely as the Americans probably can with their capabilities. It is very specific target. All the other parts of the war can be done without involvement of the Americans. One remark, the Americans involve very much, and we thank America for that, in our defensive efforts. There are 2 batteries of THAAD in Israel, integrated to our Arrow 2 and 3 systems, and together they are intercepting the coming missile. And around 25-30% of what was intercepted was done by American soldiers. But in the attack side of the war, we made them the whole war with American-made technology. When last time that I checked, all the aeroplanes which flew from Israel to Iran and back were American-made. So it's American involvement is by technology. All the munition that we are buying in America, spare parts which we are getting, probably we are sharing information. But the war itself is conducted by Israel, by Israelis, only Israelis. Americans are helping in the defensive side.
When we talk about the defenses, it appears as if the success rate of intercepts has dropped, has gone down. I've seen some reports talking from 90% to somewhere in the 65% range. What accounts for that problem?
No, the statistics is different.
Okay.
People are combining and making try to understand it based on the information that we had about Iron Dome. Iron Dome success was between 90 to 95%. We never said that would be the success of the Arrow. We are speaking here about intercepting ballistic missiles. It's totally different challenge. And the launch into Israel till yesterday around 400, and the success of the interception was around 80%. And that is within our expectations. We didn't have expectation for more than 80% relating to the Iron Dome versus to the Arrow 2 and 3 versus against the ballistic missiles. Don't compare between the missiles coming from 100 kilometers to the missiles coming from 1,500 kilometers. I mean, it's much complicated, much more problematic.
No, that makes sense, absolutely. But let me ask this: the success that you've had in destroying the missile stockpiles and the ability to build more on the Iranian side, that could account for, obviously, it does account for their inability going forward to launch the large-scale barrages that I think was part of their early strategy. But on the Israeli side, is there any issue in terms of shortages of interceptors, particularly for the Arrow system?
Up till now, we don't have. We made the calculation in the past, taking into account a long war. We understood that with Iran, it's not going to be a short one, and we have kind of calculation how much should we use in every stage of the war. Up till now, we didn't go outside the calculation that we had.
Okay, and I know this is a tough question. You may not necessarily want to go into any detail on it, but when looking at the success of the strikes that you've had so far, how good is the intelligence? How good are the damage assessments, and how confident can you be in understanding both how much damage has actually been done to the nuclear program infrastructure, and also in terms of just targeting launchers, missile stockpiles, that sort of thing?
In such an event, there is a competition between the efforts to get more intelligence about more targets, new targets, and the BDA, because at the end you have limited sources and you have to allocate them. And the In Israel, according to our DNA, I'm sure that we are allocating more for new targets than for the BDA. Okay, the BDA will wait, we will learn slowly what happened. And if we will have to do something else to complete something that was not good enough during the burst, but if you ask me where the intelligence is putting more efforts now, is not about the BDA, it's about new targets. But we have pretty good intelligence about the BDA, because if you destroy something completely, you see it burning, and you know how many missiles were in that, you can take out all the missiles, and so on and so forth. So we have apparently good BDA, not complete BDA. It will take time, because we prefer to put our resources in producing new targets.
General, if you would stay right where you are. I apologize, but we've got to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back. I've got a long list of additional questions to ask you. We'll be right back with General Amidror and more on the situation report. Stick around. Welcome back to the Situation Report. Joining me once again is retired IDF Major General Yaakov Amidror. General, thank you very much for sticking around. We were talking in the last segment about the issue of quality of intelligence, the ability to have confidence in damage assessments as you're working through the various operations. And one question I wanted to throw your way is, when it comes to U.S. involvement, right? It's top of mind, obviously, in the U.S. and you know, there seems to be a cottage industry of trying to guess what President Trump may do in terms of jumping into this conflict. To what degree do those damage assessments play a role? Because I'm wondering, I guess, and I know this is somewhat speculation, but I'm wondering, you know, if perhaps the White House is waiting for those damage assessments to understand whether, in fact, their assistance is actually needed.
It's clear that the assistance is needed for one purpose, at least. And the one purpose is very clear. It's the destroying of Fordo installation. Israel cannot do it with our present capabilities within the Air Force. I'm sure that now in Israel somewhere, smart people are sitting and try to think, what can we do without the Americans? I'm not sure that they will find a good solution, but this is the only point in which we need active support of the Americans in the offensive side of the war to destroy Fordo. Theoretically, 4B2 can come, do what they need to do, going back to Diego Garcia, and it's the end of the involvement of the American in the war, theoretically. For sure, when you come in, you don't know how it will be ended. I know all the stories, but theoretically, this is what needed. And I don't think that the BDA is the issue here. I think that the Americans have good information about what we succeeded to do and what we want to do in the future, and they have a good impression, if not good picture, impression of the success of Israel and what was destroyed and what will be destroyed in the future.
Okay. Let's, if I could, I want to shift just slightly. And this is kind of where we fall into the realm of speculation, and I apologize for going in that direction. But we talked just briefly about regime change, the idea that, yes, you know, the regime will certainly be weakened as a result of what's been taking place. But ultimately, as you pointed out, it's up to the Iranian people as to what happens. From a speculative point of view, what could that look like from your perspective? What might come in behind this regime?
It very much depends what will happen to the regime. It might be that this regime will remain because the regime is very strong and very cruel and ready to take measures against any kind of opposition which might emerge in the street of Tehran. And on the other side, there is no opposition as such. I mean, there is no any organization that you can call this is the opposition. There is no group of people you can say these are the leaders of the opposition. So when the regime is ready to take very hard measures, and on the other side, there is no any organized opposition, unless the mass of the people are running to the palace and kill the king, other than that, the regime can continue. So this is an option which is a very realistic one. But from our point of view, regime without nuclear capability and without missiles that can reach Israel is not a regime that we are going to fight with. I mean, we don't have any claim to the Iranians. We don't want to be destroyed by Iran, and this is why we went to the war. But if this regime remains, but without nuclear capability and missiles, it's the business of the Iranian people to deal with the regime, not ours.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's an interesting.
But if the regime will be toppled somehow, I don't know how, I don't know by whom, it might be a regime change. That another regime will emerge, as Khomeini did in '79, or it will be a chaos, which is also something which cannot be ignored.
Yeah, that kind of falls under the category of, I suppose, in a way, not to put this, and I don't mean to be glib, but be careful what you wish for, I suppose, because we do have recent case studies. Yeah,
I agree with you. Don't try to do too much because you find yourself with too little.
Yeah. Looking at the operations so far, how important has it been, and why, to be targeting military and IRGC leadership?
From our point of view, it is part of the military plan to make the decision-making process much more problematic for the rulers of Iran. We went to a war in which we wanted to be sure that we can reach the targets, that we can reach the goal of this destruction of the nuclear capability and the missiles, and we wanted it will be not impossible, but much more complicated for the decision makers to make the decisions. What to launch, when to launch, where to move the anti-air missiles, where to move the facilities which are very sensitive, and so on and so forth. So from our point of view, decapitating of the military leadership was very important part of the military plan, not connected at all to regime change. They are not the regime. The regime is Khamenei and the entourage around him. And he himself is not so important. It's not a terror organization, not Hezbollah, that you kill Nasrallah and this is people don't know what to do. This is a strong establishment with many people, with deep state behind it. It is not going to change if you take the leader. But if you take all the medium decision makers, the chief of staff, the head of the intelligence, so on and so forth, you make the whole process of understanding what is the situation and how to react very problematic for them.
How important is the IRGC? I mean, I guess, let me rephrase that if I could. Which is more important to the regime? Is it Khamenei and the mullahs, or is it the IRGC?
IRGC. This is the basis. If Khamenei goes now, someone else will take the responsibility, will be nominated. If the IRGC disappearing, it's the end of this Iran. Iran will remain as a state. But this Iran of the mullahs, will not survive. Is one of the mullahs. The IRGC is the basis for all the mullahs. So it is very important, not important. This is if you ask for the regime, what is the center of gravity? The IRGC.
Yeah, my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems as if they have meaning that the Revolutionary Guard Corps, they've got their tentacles in every aspect of Iran, the economy, the government, the media. They seem to have
the military, not less important. Yeah. The military, not less important. Mm-hmm. Yes, you are right. They are as I said, they are the basics. They are everywhere, and they have the responsibility to keep the regime going on and to make sure that no one will revolt. And if we cannot eliminate the IRGC, it's a huge body. But if you ask theoretically, what is the basis for the stability of the regime and the ability of the regime to survive is the IRGC.
Okay. How would you describe the this is going to sound odd, but how would you describe the management style or structure of the IRGC? And what I mean by that is it effectively a top-down where the generals are unquestioned, they're the leaders, and then below that, nobody really has decision-making authority, they're not given flexibility or responsibility, or is it more diffused than that, and they push down decision-making to lower levels?
No, they don't push the decision-making to the lower levels, but they push the implementation to the lower level. After having the policy, the lower level can act and probably, if they achieve it, they go ahead within the frame, no one interferes.
And again, shifting gears a little bit, going back inside Israel, from your perspective, what's the mood of the people like right now in Israel as it relates to this conflict?
I think that from the beginning of this part of the war, remember we are in a long war since the 7th of October, almost a year and a half ago, more than a year and a half ago. But I think that the decision to go to Iran was accepted as a very legitimate act. You hear very few voices against it. The feeling of most of the Israelis is that the whole war cannot be ended without taking care for the head of the snake. Everyone understands that we fought Hamas. Hamas is the result of the efforts of the Iranians. We fought Hezbollah. Everyone understands that this is an organization which has been established by the Iranians, financed by the Iranians. All the weapon system came from Iran and Syria, and Syria was kind of state-controlled by the Iranians. So I think that the feeling here in Israel that it will be impossible or not logic to make the war without ending it, taking care for the head of the snake.
Is there any likelihood, I know what their public comments have been, but is there any likelihood that a ceasefire could exist and a peace proposal of some sort could exist in which the Iranians are still allowed to enrich uranium?
From our point of view, the answer is very strong, clear no. And I hope that the Americans will not do the same mistake again. The bad agreement which was achieved by the Obama administration was, from our point of view, a very bad one. And I hope that this administration will not make the same mistake again.
What again? I know this is a tough one to answer, I suspect, but when you look at the last agreement, the 2015 agreement, and part of that was the idea that, okay, well, we've got trust but verify. We'll have inspectors on the ground. From your perspective, if we put a percentage on it, to what degree was there transparency in that deal?
The problem is the deal was not the monitoring system, in spite of the fact that the weapon system was not under monitoring at all. It was not part of the agreement. And missiles hadn't been part of the agreement. It was just the enrichment part. And the enrichment part, the Iranians were smart enough. They didn't cheat about the enrichment. They prepared the next generation of the ability to enrich, which is more problematic. New modern centrifuges has been produced, and they learn how to do better, and then to accelerate the timetable of the enrichment, because the agreement gave them the ability to make research about new generation of, and then at the end of the day, they ended with new centrifuges that can make the job much easier for them. And remember that at the end, the agreement was very limited in time. This year, 26, supposed to be the last year of the agreement. So from our point of view, it was very bad agreement because it gave the Iranians the ability to enhance their capabilities without enriching, and in 26 to end the agreement at all and to have all the legitimacy to produce whatever they want. So I thought it is a very bad agreement. By the way, when the agreement was exposed to the media and the people, Susan Rice, my counterpart, gave a speech in AIPAC convention. She didn't say it's a good agreement. She said it's the best that could be achieved. And I told her, your best is not enough. But I think that even that was not the real story. The Americans had very good cards. The negotiators missed the opportunity. They could achieve a better agreement. So I believe, I hope, I pray that this administration will not make the same mistakes again.
One last question, General, if I could. The question of the timing of the conflict when you started this operation against Iran. Why that timing? Did you, again, I know this is tough to answer, but was there specific intelligence that was acquired that said, now we have to move? Was it a matter of you've weakened the proxy network to such a degree that there was just an opportunity? It was a unique opportunity. What accounted for the timing of this?
I think it's a combination. It's the perfect storm from the positive side. We understood immediately after the 7th of October that we have an opportunity here to get rid of the proxies. If we do it one by one, we don't fight all of them together. We are going on Hamas, then we are going on Hezbollah, then we are, the collapse of the regime in Syria gave us a huge opportunity. And that was the end of the ability of the Iranians to rebuild the Hezbollah, and they lost the ability to influence the Middle East. What King Abdullah of Jordan called the Shiite crescent disappeared. And that was the opportunity. Then there was the timetable of the Iranians. The Iranians decided, and we had very good intelligence about it, to escalate to the whole process within the weaponization system, the group that they had. It was done very secretly because they understood that this is the only element that if they finish, it's the end of the story. We cannot stop the process anymore. And we understood that we might miss it because if they continue with the same way that they decided to do, we have very little time to stop it. And the decision to accelerate the preparations for producing thousands of missiles. They have in mind, I don't know, 10,000 missiles within 2.5 years. We understood that both are very close to a situation in which tomorrow it will be too late. And the combination between the new opportunity based on our achievements in the war and the understanding that tomorrow might be too late brought us to this period. The day itself was the day 61 from the declaration of the President of the United States of America that the Iranians have 60 days to reach an agreement. We waited the whole 60 days, risking our agents in Iran that could be exposed. And the result was the day that we decided that it is after the timetable that the Americans and the Iranians had, according to America, to achieve an agreement. It's not we which said 60 days, it's the president said 60 days. And nothing is moving on. Now, the Iranians are planning to have more time to continue with their nuclear and missile project. The Americans understood that the Iranians are playing with them. So that was the result. The day was picked because it was the 61 days after the declaration of the president. The decision, the principal decision, was because it was almost too late, and the opportunity was there. And don't forget that having more open administration in Washington is also a factor in our decisions.
Yes. Listen, General, unfortunately, we've run out of time because I've got a number of questions left for you. I can only hope that when we call you again that you'll agree to come on back because we very much appreciate all your experience, your insight, your comments. Thank you, General Yaakov Amidror, former National Security Advisor for Israel. Again, thank you very much for stopping by and sharing your experience.
You are most welcome, and thank you, America, for all the help that we are getting.
Excellent. Take care, sir. Be careful. All right. Coming up after the break, as Israel strikes batter Tehran and the regime reels, well, many are asking, will Iran's people take back their country? We just had a little bit of that conversation. We'll get perspective from former New Jersey Senator Robert Torricelli. Stick around. Welcome back to the PDB Situation Report. As Israel's campaign grinds on, one question is gaining urgency. What happens if the Islamic regime in Iran collapses? While the mullahs still cling to power, their grip is weakening. Decades of repression, economic ruin, and international isolation have left many Iranians disillusioned. But if the regime falls, who fills the vacuum? I'm glad you asked that question. And how should the U.S. and its allies respond? That's another good question you've asked. Joining me now is former U.S. Senator Bob Torricelli. He's a longtime advocate for reform in Iran and remains closely engaged with opposition voices and exiled leaders watching events unfold. Sir, thank you very much for taking the time here on the Situation Report.
Thank you for having me. I've actually looked forward to it.
Excellent. Well, hopefully you feel that same way after we finish talking. Let's start from sort of the top line view. Give me your perspective on what's happening right now with the Israel-Iran conflict.
Yeah, Mike, let me also to make clear from the beginning, although I've spent most of my adult life in the United States government, since leaving the government, although I'm a private citizen, I've stayed involved in this issue by a consultant to the opposition in Iran, those who would like to replace the Ayatollahs. So I want your audience to be clear that while my views are always the interest of the United States, I've interpreted that interest also involved regime change in Iran. I want to be completely forthcoming with you. I think the Israelis may have started with a limited objective that was to compromise the purification of uranium, plutonium by the Iranians. It quickly expanded to also destroying their ability to make ballistic missiles. But now we're on the verge of something broader, and that is building upon the enormous economic pressure and the political stability and the isolation of the Iranian government. We're entering into that phase of regime change. That is where we could solve these problems permanently by eliminating the Ayatollah and/or the government. That obviously is a prescription to solve a much bigger problem, but also much, much more complicated.
Yeah, it's interesting because Netanyahu has and others on the Israeli side have been, I think, relatively clear that their objectives are to go after and to decimate the nuclear program, to ensure they can no longer fire ballistic missiles into Israel. But they've also been clear that regime change as an objective is not on their plate, but that should conditions allow for it, then that's up to the Iranian people.
Yeah, we've become very close to that policy morphing into something different, and that is that as Iran gets more destabilized, And you're not starting from scratch. There's enormous resistance to the Iranian government within Iran. You've seen this in street demonstrations that have come up 3 times in the last 15 years that have come very close to, I think, threatening the regime. The question now is, you never know with a society, and it's very hard to judge from the outside. When you destroy its military capability, when you do economic damage, when a foreign power attacks, this can swing 2 ways. It can consolidate the population behind the regime, as I think would happen in the United States if someone attacked us, or it can further destabilize it. People realizing they're paying an enormous price for the actions of an illegitimate government and seek its overthrow. We've gotten this wrong as much as we've gotten it right in the United States, and trying to figure that out. You don't get it right from abroad. My own view, knowing the expatriate community and watching Iran, I think it's a powder keg. I think with a push, the Iranian people could take this into their own hands.
Let me ask you this. I've talked to a number of Iranians who have said, look, the people, not the regime, but the people, they don't have a problem with Israel, right? That's not an issue. There's almost more of a problem between the Persians and the Arabs in a way. But at the same time, you don't tend to rise up and protest and overthrow a regime when you're being bombed, right? And so I think I get the sense when talking to some Iranians that they're very conflicted here, right? And
we're saying the same thing. We're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
It's you no matter how awful your leader is, you tend to rally around them when you're getting attacked from afar. Nevertheless, looking at as I tend to, American interests exclusively, the interest of the United States, despite what our government has said in recent years, is for this government to be overthrown. I know we've made that mistake before. We've tried regime change in places where we couldn't, we shouldn't, we did, and it backfired. I accept all that. We've made a lot of mistakes in this arena. In this case, I want your audience to remember, these are the people who took the hostages in 1980. These are the people who planted IEDs all over Iraq that took the arms, lives, and legs of hundreds and thousands of American soldiers. These are the people who have funded Hezbollah and Hamas. This is not a regime that had a bad policy for a while. They are, I don't say this lightly, they are the face of evil on earth. And the Israeli bombing campaign may rid them of the ability to purify fuel and to build an atomic weapon. That may succeed. But ultimately, the only way to get stability in the region and the nuclear threat is to eliminate this regime. If the Israelis can do it, more power to them. I think it's going to take more than the capabilities of Israel. The seeds of that revolution are on the streets of the cities of Iran. I'd point you to the last 3 major disruptions that you've seen in Iran. People clearly are ready, given a push. The problem in the American government, in my opinion, is we've come to the view that there's no alternative. And this is probably influenced by what happened in Iraq, that if you take out Saddam Hussein, it's chaos. There's no one else. Iran is not Iraq. It is a large country. It has institutions. It has a middle class. It has a professional class. It has educational institutions. I think there's much more reason to believe that if the Ayatollahs were gone, you could get an internal revolution. And I say this just as you just said, you talk to Iranians in America. There's a strong diaspora community, a wealthy diaspora community, an educated diaspora community, very dedicated to rebuilding the country, hopefully with a democratic government. And in my case, where I'm close to the MEK, probably the leading group in the diaspora, they're almost a shadow government. They have people who could, as part of a coalition or by themselves, could govern Iran tomorrow if they could get past the Revolutionary Guards and the Ayatollah.
So let's talk just a minute. I know that a lot of this is speculation, right? I mean, and that's true. And I'm also, before I forget, I appreciate you. I'm glad that you mentioned all the blood that's on the current Iranian regime's hands from their activities in Iraq. I don't think a lot of people understand just how many lives were lost or damaged, injured over the years.
So, Mike, when you see an
US
injured
side.
American, when you see an injured American veteran without an arm or a leg, you think Iran. That's
Yeah.
where those IEDs came from.
Yeah, there's yeah, it's again, I don't think it's really understood by the general population. They think of Iran as something outside of any concern that the U.S. may have had in the past. But here, let me ask you this, if I could. The IRGC, like they've got their hands in everything. They're in all aspects of Iran. And and again, I know this is speculation, sir, but what's the likelihood that whatever comes in behind this regime, should there be change, what's the likelihood that the IRGC is going to be somehow not involved? I mean, I have a hard time imagining them giving up their grasp of power.
I don't think they give it up. I think the best analogy is to see the IRGC as the Nazi Gestapo. It is an army within an army. It is an army within the regime designed not to protect from foreign enemies, but to protect the regime from the people. And kind of like a Gestapo, they own means of production, they own real estate, they are a part of the economy, they're a nation within the nation. They will not give up power gently. This is their families, it's their standard of life, it's their legacy, it's their lives. They will cling to the last possible moment. But it's a nation of 94 million people. If you get a revolution on the streets, as powerful as the IRGC may be, look what happened to Savak. Savak was the Shah's internal army. Same model, same methods, same brutality, same economics. They vanished overnight. When the Shah fell, they ended up in California, they ended up in Iraq, they ended up in France, they headed for the winds. So will these people.
Okay. Well, and a great deal of the senior leadership has already been taken out during this current.
The senior leadership has been taken out, and I will guarantee you, just by instinct, watching these characters through my life, that if you're a senior mid-level person in the IRGC, you've got an airline ticket and some cash in your back pocket, just in case.
So where in this equation does Reza Pahlavi and the monarchists fit?
I know this is controversial in the Iranian community in the United States, but you ask an honest question, you get an honest answer. There's a lot of emotional attachment by a lot of American Iranians who were in the Shah's regime, came and sought refuge in the United States, and we accepted them, and they built good lives here. I know they have memories of the Shah's time. There's a nostalgia to it. But very frankly, the specter of the Shah's son returning to Tehran is a gift for the Iranian regime. Because their argument, like unfortunately some in the American government, is, well, the Ayatollah may be a problem, but there's no alternative. If there's no Ayatollah, it's the Shah. And if that's the twin reality, the Ayatollahs or the Shah, we're not going to get a public uprising to overthrow the government. People are not going to make that choice. And that's a false choice. There are democratic sectors within Iran. There is the IRGC, there's the MEK that is on the outside, based in Paris, that is an umbrella for thousands of Iranians within Iran and in the diaspora. As I said, there's almost a shadow government. There is an alternative, but as long as the regime can hold up the specter that if we fall, you've got the Shah back, it's a gift to them.
Yeah. Senator, if you could stay right where you are. I apologize, but we have to take a break, and then we'll be back with Senator Torricelli and more here on the Situation Report. Stick around. Welcome back to the PDB Situation Report. Joining me once again is former Senator Bob Torricelli. We've been talking about, in a broad sense, what could happen, what may result if there is a regime change. Senator, anytime you say regime change, right, particularly here in the U.S., people get a little bit squirrely, right?
I understand that.
And yeah, and so I'm wondering from your perspective. I don't disagree with you. Look, anything other than that is just limited. You're putting lipstick on a pig or Band-Aid on a sucking chest wound, however you want to describe it. You're kicking the can down the road to deal with the problem at some point in the future. And so I don't disagree at all that would be the best outcome. Let me ask you this. I know how people in the U.S. government and elsewhere feel about it, but let's look at the regional actors. Right, the Saudis, the Jordanians, and others. What's your perspective on how they feel about the current conflict, but also about this idea of a change in Iranian government?
So in the neighborhood, all nations are not equal in power or influence. There's an outside sphere of Iran, and you can understand it. It is the largest country, is potentially the most powerful. It is the most unstable and is by far the most aggressive. So this willingness to arm, to seek alliances, to seek protection, at the same time to engage with the Iranians to try to keep an edge off the problems. I don't want to say this in a disparaging way, but in the region, there's always been a sense that you can kind of trade your way out of trouble. Just keep enough commerce going there of one type or another to keep peace with them. But if you ask me, would there be a relief in Bahrain or in Riyadh if the regime fell? I think there would be fireworks.
They just won't say it out loud.
They will not say it out loud. There's an enormous intimidation. I have affection for some of these nations in the region, so I hate being overly critical of them. But the reality is, most of these regimes in the region live in fear of fundamentalism and poorer parts of their societies that are not as in touch with the monarchies or the regimes. The top lives in fear of the bottom. And there's always this belief that the fundamentalist Islam of Iran can stoke that problem. So it's not simply a fear that Iran can attack militarily with sophisticated weapons. It's more they can create unrest on the streets from below. Monarchies often live with that fear. In this case, I think even more so. So the world's a strange place. It creates odd alliances. But I will guarantee you the Saudis, for whatever they say, and the UAE, for whatever they say, and the Kuwaitis are hoping with bated breath there could be a regime change here without them having to show their cards.
Mm-hmm. Kind of go back to the idea of, be careful of what you wish for and what could come in behind this, right? We've got recent case studies, certainly Libya is a good example, Iraq. I mean, we know that what comes next, can be worse.
That's all true. Let me tell you, I'm old enough to have a lot of old stories. When I was a kid, out of law school, I worked in the Carter White House. And I remember Hamilton Jordan having a staff meeting saying, if we can just avoid the problems of Vietnam or Watergate, we'll have a successful administration. I remember thinking, that's your scale of history? We're learning from the last 10 years. Actually, it wasn't even 10 years. We're learning from the last 6 years. Isn't history a little deeper than that? What you say is true. Regime change in Libya backfired. Regime change even in Iraq backfired. I accept all that. Regime change in Germany and Italy and Japan worked out pretty well. Regime change in Poland and Czechoslovakia and East Germany worked out pretty well. So I'm not telling you it always works. I'm not telling you it doesn't have dangers. It does. But in many ways, our attempts to change some of these governments, whether it was as a product of war or economic pressure or otherwise, in many cases, it also made the world better. All I'm suggesting to you is that kind of like my days out of law school in the Carter White House. We need to think more broadly than our unfortunate experience of the last 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
We're better than
I'm
that.
just, as you were talking, sir, I was trying to, in my mind, catalog any successful regime change examples in the Middle East.
That's it is a challenge. And I don't know that I can. I had hoped that the regime change in Egypt was going to be more successful, but if I could go back and take Mubarak, Barack Obama almost single-handedly took out Mubarak, and we ended up with a more fundamentalist, more brutal, less American aligned. The United States has a way of making our own problems. So I'm giving you the best example against my argument.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's and a lot of it, admittedly, is speculation. So I know I'm putting you in sort of that uncomfortable position of having to answer questions with speculation. But is the opposition? Let's look at the MEK as the best example. Is the opposition strong enough to? Again, I'm not sure how to phrase this, to take control, to step into a vacuum, should the current regime collapse?
I think your phrase, step into a vacuum, is the key here. No opposition group is strong enough right now to invade Iran, defeat their military forces, and march into Tehran. If that's the model you have in mind, then the State Department is right. There's no one with that capability. But that is unlikely to be the scenario. I mean, I would have argued that Lenin wasn't strong enough to march across the German border and take over Russia either. He returned to, I think he returned to St. Petersburg with 24 men. With Napoleon left Corsica with what, 80 men to take down the monarchy. It's walking into what you said is the vacuum. The Ayatollahs are only falling for the same reason the Shah fell. It's not that their guns don't work anymore. It's that people just stop cooperating. At some point, soldiers just say, well, I'm not pointing these guns at my neighbors anymore. People just won't support the regime anymore. They stop working. Revenue stops coming in. People take to the streets and they take over the means of production. I mean, several thousand oil workers right now, if they revolted, could shut down the Iranian economy. My guess is a few barracks.
Can I ask you, before I forget, sir, I'm sorry for interrupting. I'm at that age where if I don't ask what pops into my head, I may forget. So you mentioned as an example, should the oil workers go on strike? There was a recent situation, truck drivers on strike in Iran.
Exactly.
And then it went off the headlines. It kind of flared up briefly. It looked like it might, catch on, and then we hear nothing else about it. What can you tell us about that situation?
Well, first, you got to be very careful with news out of Iran. In the United States, if the New York Times doesn't have a reporter there, or the network doesn't send a reporter, and neither of which exists in Tehran, from an American perspective, it didn't happen. And you got to be very careful of that. For months, there were revolts going on in the streets of Iranian cities. And if the average American wouldn't have known it was even going on because there's no mainstream reporter there. So you got to be careful of that. But the scenario you're talking about is exactly what I have in mind, that this doesn't come from armed invasion. You get regime change because the truck drivers won't deliver food, the oil workers won't keep the pumps running or the docks going. In the case of the Shah, it was the small shopkeepers. They just shut down. They wouldn't take customers anymore, and it created an economic collapse. This happened from lower middle class store owners, really were the heart of the collapse of the Shah. Where this comes from in Iran, no one knows. I guarantee you, whatever the CIA thinks, they're wrong. They don't know.
I guess I should take offense at that, given my background, but I'll let that one go.
Well, you remember the famous memo that the CIA wrote to President Carter, predicting that the Shah had another 20 years as they turned to an island of stability, and he was gone in 2 weeks. So, and that's not a fault of the institution. It's a fault of sitting
It's a
thousands
fault
of
of
miles
intelligence.
away.
Yeah,
It's a fault,
right.
and you don't know. But it's wild. But I have the overwhelming instinct wherever it's coming from. Just you look at the circumstances, it's coming. And to your question, could the MEK fill the vacuum? Yes, either alone or more likely in a coalition of other opposition groups. They have the resources, the will, the expertise to come in a vacuum, not in a war, in a vacuum, and make the trains run on time, get the oil pumped, get the mail delivered, pick up the garbage, and transition into a free economy of some definition.
Okay. This is going to be maybe an awkward question, but I mean, I know what you are hoping for, which I think, obviously I agree, right? It would be the best thing for regional stability, for national security interests of the U.S. and our allies, for a regime change. So I know that that's the hope for result, but what do you think? What do you think will happen?
I have no idea. I don't know.
That's a very honest answer.
I can tell you the end game, but this could play out over the next 5 days or play out over the next 10 years. I mean, at the end of the day, a regime with this narrow a base, with these economic problems, that has oppressed its own people. I mean, every time they lead the world by far in executions. I mean, to be a member of the MEK, for example, is a death sentence. You do that over enough years and you kill enough people, you suppress enough people, another generation losing any quality of life, any economic opportunity, it compounds, it builds to an inevitable result. The regime cannot survive it. But different cultures have a different measure of the ability to absorb pain. Look at it as a spectrum. Of all the nations of the world I know, the country that can take pain the least is the United States. You disrupt our quality of life. I'm not saying this, I love America, but this is not our strong suit. Disrupt our quality of life and to our credit, our freedoms, have us lose faith in the future, the incumbent government's going to have a problem. But it has surprised me in my life, the ability of some cultures to absorb pain, enormous pain. I mean, look how long the Russians put up with Soviet communism. Right. Generations were lost, but they put up with it. And that is true in many regimes in the Middle East. Look how long the Chinese put up with Maoist communism. And I mean, the Great Leap Forward in the 1950s, 50 million people starved to death, but the regime continued. Now, so how long people will put up with this is different by cultures. Yeah. But that doesn't change the end result. In the end, it accumulates, the pressure accumulates, and people rebel. It will happen in Iran. You ask me when? Honestly, I have no idea. Neither does anybody else. Only that it's coming.
Well, sir, I hope that when we pick up the phone and give you a call, you'll come back, because I would love to.
I'd love it.
Revisit this.
I would enjoy it, and I'm honored to be on today, and thank you for having me.
No, sir, thank you. Senator
Bye-bye.
Bob Torricelli, here on the Situation Report. I suspect we'll be talking with the senator again in the not too distant future, given I don't think this conflict is going to be solved anytime soon, frankly. That's all the time we have for this week's PDB Situation Report. And if you have any questions or comments, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. You know what we do with your questions, your comments. We take the best ones every month and we smash them together into an episode that we call Ask Me Anything. We got another one in the tube ready to launch. So keep the cards and letters coming. Finally, to listen to the podcast of this show ad-free, you can do that. You can do that very simply. Just become a premium member of the President's Daily Brief by visiting pdbpremium.com. See, I told you it was simple. I'm Mike Baker, and until next time, you know the drill. Stay informed, stay safe, stay cool.